Hi guys, welcome back. Episode 6 of the Fast Turks podcast. You join us here on November the 23rd, date of recording. So a few days post-race, we had a minute to sort of digest the weekend's events. And so we're going to kick off our discussion on so it's going to be a bit of a discussion of obviously both just a roundup of Phillip Island, and then we'll just sort of have a retrospective look back at the season as a whole, and maybe just some thoughts and possible predictions even for next season. So, Jem, over to you.
Thanks a lot, mate. Hi, guys. Thanks for joining us again. I would just like to very quickly say that we actually started recording this episode 2 weeks ago, and we were about 20 minutes in, and we found that we've got a special guest as well, or we had a special guest who couldn't make it today. We found that there was some audio technical difficulties, and we just couldn't take the chance in as much as putting out something that, because you don't know how it will turn out in post-production. So I just want to say we were actually ahead of time on this one. We were going to do a MotoGP look back at the final round and talk about some of the testing, but unfortunately that's just been and gone. So I just wanted to qualify that. We're going to concentrate more on a World Superbike this time round. So yeah, we had Phillip Island, obviously. At this point, we all know that before the races began, we already had our newly crowned champion in Alvaro Bautista. So congrats to him and Ducati. It went better than I thought it would, actually, because I don't know, in my mind, I thought Toprak was going to have a hard time there. Even though he won his first ever race on a Yamaha in 2020, just as before COVID hit. I don't know. I just thought to myself that it's got a long straight, and some of the corners, like they're quite fast and flying, and like long, fast and flying corners that I've found like throughout Toprak's time at Yamaha haven't always necessarily suited that bike. So yeah, in my mind, he was going to go in with a bit of he might struggle here against Ray, and Ray's got a really good record there as well. But Bautista won there in his first year on the Ducati when he went there in 2019.
Yep.
So I just thought it was just going to be a Bautista Ray show, and if Toprak can get in and amongst it again, Phillip Island, very changeable weather conditions, and if I'm being brutally honest with myself, Ray is still the man, I'd say, in wet weather. If it's full wet weather, he's typically the man to beat. He's always there or thereabouts. He's always quick. He's always consistent. So that's why I did think to myself, if I'm honest, I know it's easy to say after the event, I see Johnny Ray winning at least one race this weekend because he's gone through such a long drought and he's been very close on occasion. It's not through the lack of trying that he hasn't won. So I did have him down for a win. And that first race was just, I said it in the Fast Turks Instagram post, if you check it, I said it was just textbook Phillip Island. It started off as a wet race, so it was called as a wet race, so flag to flag. There was none of this, well, we're going to call it off if the weather conditions change, unless, of course, it's torrential to the point where it's just deemed unsafe. Mm-hmm. But it was, they started all on wets, and then very quickly you could see it's sunny, this track is drying quick, there's a racing line emerging, a dry line. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking, Toprak's there. Yeah, the wind's on. And he, right up to the point of about, halfway up to that, it was about halfway through where Ray and Toprak, and I thought, wow, they're coming together. This is really exciting. It was kind of reminded me of a Formula One race, back in the old days, Formula One, not today's Formula One, old days Formula One. And then whatever happened, Ray got out, and I was like, where's Toprak? It was like 5 seconds, 6 seconds later. I was like, well, that's the race lost because it doesn't matter how fast he goes now in these drying conditions. There's not that much of a performance difference in the dry conditions between Ray and Toprak that in, 10 or so laps, Toprak is going to make up 5 or 6 seconds on Johnny Ray around this track. I don't think so. So I was gutted.
It's interesting that you felt like he didn't struggle much this weekend because as I was watching it, I felt like he was struggling.
By his standards,
Yeah, I guess maybe by his standards he was struggling, but yeah, I didn't. I think the team made a couple of questionable decisions in strategy over the weekend. I think in race one, I think they left him out too late because I think he was running in fourth when he came in, if I'm not mistaken, and he was. At this point, I think Lowe's had made the move on him. Ray and Bautista were sort of broken off in like a separate sort of pair at the front. And Toprak looked like he was on a consistent downward trend at that point in the race because he was no longer in touch with the leading pair. Lowe's had made his way past and didn't look like Toprak. At no point in that battle with Lowe's trying to stay ahead of him did he look like he was suddenly going to be able to drop the hammer and get away. So on a drying track, why Yamaha didn't get... I mean, it's all easy in to say in retrospect, but as I was watching it in real time, I was thinking, why is he still out? Get him in. He's struggling. The bike is struggling. The conditions are changing. You're not suddenly going to start bridging the gap to the guys in front. They're about to pit in the next lap or two anyway. So your only hope of getting a result out of this race is to try and undercut and beat them to the punch with the pit stop, and then leaving the pit stop so late meant the pits got congested, and then like you said, he lost a few seconds to Ray getting back out in the pits, and then it was that was race done, like you say. So I feel like there was a quite obvious strategy error there, and I'm very surprised that the team's strategists didn't think this is the time to bring him in, because the way that this is shaking out, it's leaving it. What were they hoping to gain by leaving him out there? To regain track position on Lowe's, as if being a few tenths ahead of him was going to suddenly be. You're not talking about getting out into first place and then potentially, hopping back out to the front of the grid after the pit stops. We're talking about gaining third or fourth potentially. So I really don't understand what the decision was, or what factors influenced that decision to leave him out. I feel like it was.
But then, if you're saying that, sorry to cut you off, but if you're saying that, then KRT made the wrong call as well, bringing Lowe, because him and Lowe's came in together. I'm looking at the lap chart here, and Toprak, as of say lap 5, was leading. He led lap 6, and then Lowe's takes over on lap 7. But at the point that before he comes in, he's in 4th at lap 9, and he's only 1.5 seconds off the lead. But I know what you're saying, that Lowe's seemed to have the upper hand.
He had the beating
at that particular moment. Yes,
yes, and I feel like they left him out a lap, possibly too long, because again, I don't think Toprak turned up there this weekend with the objective of battling it out for third. He's there to battle for wins.
Yeah.
So the moment that the front pair started to drop him, regardless of whether he was in third or fourth at that point, that for me was the moment to go for the undercut, because the Kawasaki all weekend looked great in the wet conditions. The Ducati seemed to be doing fairly well. Bautista, with the straight line speed advantage that we've been talking about all season, just meant that he could, just rather than being at 10 tenths through the corners, could maybe go in at 9 tenths and just stand it up and make that time back up on the straight. So given that the Kawasaki's clearly looked like the better machine to be on in the wet, and Bautista at this point is out of sight, I don't know why he was left out as long as he was. I mean, what's your take on that?
My take is I'm more concerned as to how Kawasaki gained 5 to 6 seconds in a pit change. I'm going to assume that there aren't massive technical differences between these bikes to remove a front wheel or a rear wheel, for that matter.
No.
So how you lose, and I'm thinking, is it one of those? The commentator said about, Johnny Ray's very, very up on this sort of getting in, and practicing like an F1 pit crew does. There's obviously in superbike racing, you don't have pit stops by and large. It's a very rare occasion. So if that is the case, if JR does make a conscious effort to say to the team, let's stay on top of this, it's rare throughout the season, but we need to get this right. And if Pata have dropped the ball on that front, then I'm going to say respect to Kawasaki, and Pata, you've got to up your game, because in my view, more than or at least every bit as much as leaving him out potentially 1 or 2 laps too long, that race was lost there because his race pace post pit stop, basically it was him and JR trading fastest laps from what I can see.
Yes. So had he have either gone in at the right time or had not have lost time in the pits. Now, I don't know whether or not it was just the team took longer swapping the tyres over, or whether or not there was, because they left it a little bit too late, in my opinion. At that point, the pit lane became too congested, and because the broadcast, I don't think, showed Toprak leaving his pit box. So I don't know whether or not there was then a procession of bikes that had then just streamed into the pits, and they weren't able to release him. And, he was held there behind the lollipop until it was safe to release him. So, but again, when you know that all the other teams around you, you're looking at the track and thinking, at any given moment now, everyone else around us is going to pull the trigger on this tyre change. The pits are going to get busy, and there may be a situation where you lose, 1, 2, 4, 5 seconds waiting for it to be safe to release the rider. So, drop ball in my opinion, from Yamaha there on race 1. So that was, I was a little bit disappointed with that.
And bearing in mind, the championship's already lost, so it's not like you're risking more than anyone else. If you just pulled the trigger a bit earlier, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. You've not lost anything. Whereas, and I think sort of just bringing it back to F1, because obviously pit stops aren't a regular feature of World Superbike. Typically, teams are always looking to make the undercut when it comes to pit stop strategy, sort of beating the opposition to the punch to get onto the right tyres at the right time. And I forget, what was it, Donington now? There was that race where Senna, I think, changed tyres like sort of 4 or 5 times because it kept on sort of, the rain was on, the rain was off, the rain was on, the rain was off. Famous.
I think that was at Donington.
European Grand Prix 1993. I remember it well.
And I think it was at some point in some broadcast somewhere, I think Martin Brundle was it somewhere. I think anyway, someone was saying that the rights, you've just got to be on the right tyre at the right time, and if whether that means making 4 or 5 pit stops in a race or 1 or none or whatever it is, just be on the right tyre at the right time. And I think, and again, for me, it was short-sighted, I think, of Yamaha in race 2. Sorry, not in race 2, in the Superpole race, to send him out with a rear intermediate and a front wet, because again, Ducati seemed to get the strategy right there.
I'm going to have to interrupt you there. According to what I've read, it was purely down to Bautista. He made the call as the rider and said, I'm going to roll the dice on this one. And the team were like, are you sure? Because everyone else is on, basically inters or wets, and you're going out on full slicks. That's a risk. And he said, I think because he was a champion already, he was just like, sod it, I'm going to go for it. I've got like this, I call it a sixth sense or some sort of, intuition that this is going to dry. And I have to say, as far as the gambles go, those gambles, and again, I'll put it up on the Instagram.
But they usually pay off.
No, those ones where you're odd, you're contrary to everyone else, they usually go wrong in bike racing, in my history of watching bike racing. When you're the odd one out, 9 out of 10 times in bike racing, you come off worse. There's a reason why you're the odd one out. On this one, he got it bang on. Bang on.
I think... I feel like it was the obvious decision to make, because again, from Toprak's perspective, he's got nothing to lose. So take the gamble, because you're going to go out there on on the Inters, and it's not like they'd only just raced on that circuit the day before and watched how spectacularly quick it went from a completely wet race to a bone dry circuit within, within 20 minutes? The track was basically dry, and slicks were the tyres to be on. So over the course of a 10-lap race, given that the track wasn't as wet to begin with, to me it seemed obvious that the dries were the tyre to be on.
I don't know, but I think with hindsight and from afar, it's easy to say that. The fact that every single team and rider, barring Alvaro Bautista, went out on some combination of either full wets or, full intermediates or half intermediate, half wet, I would just say that Bautista just rolled the dice on that one and got it spot on. And like I said, on another thing, it could have got. And the fact is, don't forget, Superpole race, 10 laps. My guess is everyone thought that's not enough time for this track to dry. And at first, it didn't look like it was, but it dried. It became that crossover point of where the slicks came in. It was about lap 3 or 4, I think, that you could see Bautista's pace suddenly was starting to get better. And I was thinking, no, Top Right's got too much in hand here. But then by about lap 7, lap 8, it was like, nah.
I'll tell you why I reached
whittling down.
No, and it was obvious. It was by lap 7. It was obvious he was gonna take the lead. But for me, again, because the Superpole race started off drier than race 1. If you then look at race 1 and sort of make an analysis, even just visually, I'm not even talking about going into the data. If you just were to look at the track in race 1 and say visually, when was it, at what point or what lap number was it roughly as dry as the start of Superpole? For me, that was probably somewhere around lap 6, 7, something like that. I can't remember exactly off the top of my head, but it was some number of laps in. So it definitely was wetter to begin with. And then all you had to do was look at that and then say, what's the crossover point for when the slicks are the tyre to be on? And then over the course of a race distance, which one's going to be the right tyre? I felt like going for the wet Inter combo was the safe option to take. And I don't know whether or not they did that because they felt like they'd made a strategic blunder on race 1. And felt that they had to, maybe sort of play it a little bit more conservative. But for me, that was 2 strategic errors from the team.
Right. So now going into race 2, fully dry with, I think throughout the commentary, they said, ever so slight spotting of rain here and there, but certainly not enough to warrant them going slower. I think I'm going to go back to your point. The Yamaha just didn't seem to hook up. It was specifically through Hayshed and Siberia and running up to Lukey Heights. It just seemed to lose bucket loads of time to both Kawasaki's. Alex Loza's got good form around there as well. He won. Yeah,
hats off to him. He had a great. He had a great weekend.
He had a really,
absolutely great weekend.
He reshared one of my stories, even though I reshared somebody else's photo. I think it was a World Superbike photo. He then reshared it off the Fast Turks because I tagged him. So cheers for that, Alex. Appreciate that, mate.
He had a great weekend. So, again, sort of hats off to him. He seemed to, and it just seemed to be that the Kawasaki was the machine to be on this weekend, which was odd because it definitely didn't look like that all season long. So I don't know if they, clearly it just suits there's something about that circuit which suits the Kawasaki's.
It does.
I think, as you say, there was a bit of spotting all through the race, and I wonder if that sort of, because it seemed like it maybe, there was a couple of onboard shots where it seemed like there was a fair amount of spotting appearing on Bautista's bubble, and I think it was right around that time. Was it Laverty that came off that caused the red?
Yes, and quite a bad pelvic injury by all accounts. So, get well soon, Eugene. I think he's a tough lad, though. I think, but it's just, that's not the way you would have wanted to retire, man. He's had a good. The last few years have been difficult for him, but there was a time where he was a force to be reckoned with. He was just digressing slightly, he was Kennan's big rival sort of towards the late noughties, so 2009, 2010, 2011. They were big rivals in Supersport. And when he went to World Supers with Yamaha, he was a force to be reckoned with. I think he was if I remember rightly, Marco Melandri's teammate.
Right.
He was a race winner. And at one point in his career, he looked like a championship, winning material rider for a period of time. And then he took that opportunity to ride in MotoGP on sort of dud machinery, and that was that. It just completely sort of any potential he had, it just came crashing back down to earth. So yeah, unfortunate for Eugene, because I would have liked to have seen him at least not finish his career smashing himself to pieces, basically.
So get well soon. But yeah, I think maybe the spotting did contribute to that accident. So as I say, it just seemed like from a couple of the onboard shots that it was just, again, like I feel like the trend for the amount of rain that was falling just seemed to be ever so slightly increasing. So I don't know if he maybe just overcooked it. Maybe it was a combination of if there wasn't any spotting, he might have had a big moment and gathered it back up. I don't know, but so yeah, get what's in. But again, Toprak just he wasn't seriously involved in race 2 either. So, and that didn't, as you say, that was a completely dry race. So it wasn't, you couldn't point to strategy or anything like that there. No. It just seemed like he didn't have the machinery.
I'd be interested to see how much of it, because he obviously struggled during the qualifying sessions as well. I'd really like to know how much of it was a fundamental Yamaha issue, or how much of it was, I dare say, perhaps a Toprak issue, or a bit of both combined. But again, Toprak is far and away the top Yamaha rider, so it's very difficult to gauge. When you don't have another, as they call them, aliens, somebody of Toprak's ability on the same bike. You've got nobody else. I like Locker, but let's be honest, he's not at that level yet. So you can't really. But he had a good outing.
So this is my point. He had a good outing, and I wonder how much of that is. I wonder how much of it is A, Locatelli had a good outing, or B, the circuit just didn't suit Toprak as much, and being that there aren't very many big stopping zones, which is where he makes his time up. Maybe it kind of exposed some potential areas where he's still got a bit of room for improvement. I'm inclined to think the latter, if I'm honest, because he don't get me wrong, he wasn't sort of again, the Kawasaki seemed to be the machine to be on this weekend. And I think that kind of is indicated by where Lowe's finished and the weekend that he had. So clearly the Kawasaki was a very competitive machine to be on. Bautista's A great rider, and B, on a fantastic machine. So, it's no surprise that he was obviously well in the mix. And, as we've already discussed, he's made some great strategic calls in the Superpole race. So for me, it was a combination of the Yamaha just didn't look as competitive, A, but I think it was telling that Locatelli was closer to Toprak this weekend, that perhaps this circuit just didn't suit him. Because he wasn't able to make the time that he makes back up in the big sort of stopping zones. And if he's then matching them ever so roughly for pace, sort of mid-corner, and on a corner exit, then without the advantage of being able to claw back that time on the brakes, I feel like that probably explains where he ended up in race 2.
Yeah. It's fine margins though, isn't it? And I was actually pleased to see Toprak right up there, even if he's not the very quickest, but when the conditions are poor, as somebody who hasn't got a great history or doing well in the wet, he's definitely come along in that regard. He's definitely improved his wet weather riding, whether that's, that horrible in between where it's not fully wet, it's not dry, it's that in between. which can be really
the
tricky.
Absolute worst conditions to be driving or riding in.
Exactly. And the fact that let's be honest, he would have been in with a shout of race one victory had, notwithstanding coming in maybe a bit late as we discussed, but had he just got out with Ray on Ray's coattails, I think a win was in the offing. And again, fine margins race two. If you take out Bautista on the slicks, he looks like he's won that race because he came second.
Mm-hmm.
He beat Johnny Ray straight up in a dash, a 10-lap dash in drying conditions. Now, I'll be honest, I'm not sure if they had the exact same tyre combination. I'm not sure about that. But again, it's by the by. The fact is he was at the pointy end in conditions that he typically doesn't always go very well in. So it was definitely a decent outing. It's just, like I said, very fine margins that sometimes can be the difference between victory and not victory, basically.
No, it's that, again, that's not to say that Top Luck put a poor performance in on race two, because, like I say, he was there or thereabouts. He just didn't shine.
Yes.
So, the sorts of distances that I can't remember how far off he finished off of P1, but I think it was something in the order of seconds. It wasn't like half a lap.
It was about 3 or 4 seconds, I think. Yeah.
So, over the course of a race distance, another couple of attempts a lap, and he's right there fighting for the win. So it's not like, again, he was sort of miles and miles off. So if you were to maybe chalk sort of a tenth of that up to the machine and a tenth of that up to maybe some room for improvement from Top Luck potentially, I don't know. But yeah, it's not like he went out there and embarrassed himself.
No.
Or whether that's because of the machinery or because of his own riding. So
sure.
So yeah. Yes, on to next season. It was good to see that he managed to keep it on the island, didn't fall, and sort of no unnecessary injuries, and picked up enough points to wrap up second in the championship.
Yeah,
because had he have had a fall at some point this weekend, there was every possibility that Ray then overtakes him for second in the championship. So yeah, congratulations. Not that knowing what Top Luck's like, not that he's interested in second, but congratulations on coming second. It was a hard-fought championship. So yeah, hopefully luck is slightly more on his side next year, and
we'll see.
We'll see how that one pans out.
On to World Supers now.
Yes,
the island. So that was an interesting one. So they had a fully like wet race in race one, and I don't know what happened. Jari Montella, John's teammate, must have had God knows how many Weetabix that day, because my man came out swinging. Like, he's Italian. It was like my man found his inner Sylvester Stallone, his Rocky.
Right, okay.
And he was just going for it. Like, they were in the full wet conditions. Like, I was watching it, gobsmacked. They were still, all right, I know they're not going to be anywhere near as quick as they are in the dry. But even if they're looking quick on the TV, that's saying something, because the TV slows stuff down. They were hooning it around there in the wet. Knee down, proper, and the commitment levels. It was a few times I was like, did he really go for that pass? Because, Phillip Island's got that very long straight, and they build up a lot of speed from, I always forget the last corner's name, but there's a lot of speed that they carry onto the straight to begin with.
Yeah.
And they're coming down that straight, even in the wet. They must be doing a good 160, maybe on those super sport bikes. I reckon they're still doing about 160 odd, maybe more mile an hour. And then they chuck it right. And, it's a braking zone, but it's not a massive braking zone. They really throw it in there. And basically it was Jari Montella and Federico Caricasulo on the Altea Ducati. They were going at each other essentially all race long. Bulega,
I'm just Googling something. Sorry, go on.
Yeah. Bulega was in third and Jun was a distant fourth, sort of on his own. And then you had Agata and Balder doing their own thing. And basically, it came down to the last lap, and Caricasulo went for a pass and washed the front out. And Montella basically took, this will be galling for Jun, and this is why he looks so dejected and so disappointed. So he's basically outperformed Montella essentially all season, albeit when his form was, by his standards, was pretty poor during the mid-season. And, you had that sort of social media blackout that he decided on doing when he spoke to Kenan.
Yeah.
So he's had to watch Montella go and win Pachetti's first race. So Montella's won his first World Supersport race, beaten Jun to the punch, and won Pachetti's first race of the season, which must have been so galling. And furthermore, he inherited third, which he admitted to, because Caricasulo crashed on the final lap going for a race-winning pass.
Mm-hmm.
So even though his third place cemented third in the championship, he looks so... I was gutted for him. He looks so disappointed. It's like... you could tell he wanted to be the one to get that Pachetti first win. And it would have broken his, World Supersport duck. But Montella was just... I don't know. Like I said, I don't know what happened, but my man just found something and was just going at it. He was superb. It was a superb race victory. I've got to give him his due.
So a little bit of background for the listeners. So I actually haven't had a chance to watch any of the Super Sports so far. So Saturday just gone was my birthday, so didn't get a chance to watch any racing then. And then on Sunday,
happy birthday, by the way.
Yeah, cheers. And then on Sunday, I was having to do some mechanicking on the car outside because I suffered a complete, total and utter catastrophic brake failure on the M1 due to a brake pad completely disintegrating on me, which was all sorts of fun. So Sunday was then occupied doing some mechanicking on the driveway, and then midweek I just haven't had a chance to watch all of the racing. So I prioritised the super bikes, but just for my own personal sort of viewing pleasure, I'm actually going to go back and watch the Super Sport. So, Jem, you're very much going to be leading this part of the conversation, just in case that our listeners are wondering, viewers / listeners are wondering why I've not got very much to say about the
I'll take the reins, dude. Yeah, I'll take the reins. But what this set up race 2. So race 2 was dry. And I think Montella just had a good weekend because he had qualified well. He was sort of I believe he was on the front row, but he got he fluffed the start and he sort of fell back, and Jun qualified 7th. So Jun wasn't, up until the sort of the racing, he wasn't really at it for some reason. So into race 2, Montella sort of falls back, but where he's obviously had this taste of victory and he feels that he's got this race-winning pace, which he did, to be fair, I think he did have. He just turned into, he saw red. It reminded me of that scene in Groundhog Day where Bill Murray realizes that he's living the same day, and he actually kidnaps the groundhog and he says, "Don't drive angry. Don't drive angry." Because Montella needed somebody to say to him, "Don't ride angry. Don't ride angry." Because he was missing first lap, we're talking about, riders going for the same bit of tarmac. He's running wide. He's missing apexes. He's coming back online and putting people out, and basically going into Hayshed. So they into Siberia where they bank left. He just smashed Jun off the track. He committed the cardinal sin and literally went from hero to zero, and he wiped his teammate out.
Oh dear, that's going to take the shine off your win, isn't it? Well, I'm sure there would have been quite the dressing down in the paddock post race for that.
I couldn't believe what I was watching because he looked so rugged and like I said, overriding even before that point. That was just the culmination of a really poorly ridden first lap off the start. So, he's fallen back and now he's desperate to get back up with the leading pack because, even in that first, in the first lap, you could still lose a lot of ground to somebody like Agata who's out in the front.
Mm-hmm.
So he sees that. And like I said, every corner he was missing up until that point that he smashed Jun. he was missing apexes and looked really rugged.
See,
It was bizarre.
Lost time is lost time, and you can't make it back. You've just got to take each lap and each corner as it comes. But I mean, it's easy to say that from our own anecdotal evidence of when we've gone karting. If you get punted by someone wide, or you feel a bit hard done by something, or whatever happens, you always tend to then overdrive a little bit, and then you find that you're actually losing time. You have to rein yourself back in, and it's easy enough to do in sim racing. So you see red, and then you think to yourself, no, I'm gonna find that extra tenth here and that extra tenth there, and I'm just gonna string together the absolute perfect lap. But you never do, so because you're driving or you're riding angry. So I'm looking forward to watching it, because it sounds like an all-action race.
The race 2 was really good as well. I have to say, because obviously John was no longer part of the proceedings, and so he didn't even complete the first lap. It obviously took the shine off from a Turkish perspective. But I still watched the rest of the race, and it was nice to see. If John's not going to win it, I was happy to see Domi see out his World Supersport, his 2 years of utter dominance. I think it was fitting, because he didn't do anything. He just wanted to. I think he just wanted to bring it home in the first race. He didn't seem to. He wasn't throwing caution to the wind. It was like, I'm just going to go out, and because he was already champion by then. But he rode safe in the first wet race, and he wasn't anywhere near the front. I think he came 5th or 6th. So in the second race, it was like, this is dry. I'm going for this now. And he put on like a proper champion's performance, and just sort of, just setting lap times that nobody could keep with. And that was, I think it was a nice way to see out, like I said, 2 years of absolute dominance. And I am so looking forward to seeing him. I don't know, like I said, something tells me that this guy is going to be pretty quick from the get-go when he goes. As long as that Yamaha is half competitive, we'll get onto that in a minute when we sort of do more of a roundup. But it was good. I think it was good to see Domi winning. I was happy for him.
Yeah, no, big congratulations to him. And it kind of, it's again, it speaks to Bautista and the way that he didn't, he's come into the final round already crowned champion, but at no point this weekend did he look like he was doing anything other than aiming for 3 victories. So it says a lot about Bautista, I think, because he just. I
was happy to see that.
Yeah, he wasn't just sort of, I'm just going to go out there and just pump some laps in. I'm not looking to fall off. I'm not looking to hurt myself. No, he was out there to dice it up and so to try and get some wins. So that was nice to see, because part of me was a little bit concerned that he would come in crowned as champion and just, I don't need to get involved in this. Just I'll let those guys, tear strips off each other at the front, and I'll just come home for third. But which would be all too easy to do. But I guess, so it was just nice to see that he was actually, putting his all in all the way right up to the last lap of the season.
Yeah, I think with Bautista as well, he does have that chip on his shoulder about, the constant, you've got the fastest bike, you're the lightest guy. He does take it personally. Part of me gets it, because obviously I get that, again, using our anecdotal karting.
I think you've got that same chip on your shoulder, that's why.
Yeah. No, it is an advantage. There's no doubt about it. But, ultimately the difference is we're karting for fun in somebody else's hired crap karts. These guys are at the pinnacle of a, when I say pinnacle, I'm talking about generally speaking, the pinnacle of a highly paid sport. So the margins they mean more. Like I've always said, what do you expect me to do if I'm driving a go-kart? At what point do I say, well, my weight's taken over here, shall I rein it back? Like, do you want me to slow down?
Ballast up. We've had this conversation. We've had these conversations enough times. The answer. You ballast up to my weight, and then we go.
but when it's hired carts, where are you supposed to do that? It's up to them to do it. If they do it, I'm not going to say anything to it.
there was one circuit, I forget which one it was now, and I think they'd add up to 20 or 30 kilos of ballast to the cart for you. But then there was those, you can get those weight training vests, those weighted vests, a little bit of ballast in the cart, a little weighted vest, chuck an extra 50 kilos in the cart, and then let's see how we get on.
Yeah, I'd wear that, and it would help. In fact, it'd probably help.
We've got that. We've got that on the public record now. We've got that on the
my problem
record.
is I need the inner seat in the car because I'm so thin and narrow. I get so that would help sort of pad me out a bit more. I'd be comfier in the car.
No worries. We'll get you a weighted vest and then send you out there.
Watch this space, people. Watch this space.
There might be an episode dedicated to that as well. Let's see how that goes.
Yep.
We'll have to rename the podcast. We'll have to rename it to the Slow Turks for that one. But
I like it. I think we'd be nice to talk about Mandalika. I know it's been done now, and obviously we've talked about, but I got to say, yeah, great. Good memories from last year. It was obviously Top Ruck won there last year, but it was like monsoon conditions. They actually cancelled the Super Pole race because of the weather. This time round, I was really happy to see it was just sunny throughout. And man, Top Ruck, second treble of the season. My man was on fire. Untouchable. He was
absolutely unstoppable. That was good to see. It was nice to see that his second treble of the year. We were lucky enough to be there to witness the first one firsthand at Donington. So it was very nice to see him to get the second treble. Definitely, and I guess that's kind of why I say, he didn't. That this weekend, what did I can't remember how I characterised it a little while earlier, but that he wasn't competitive, comparatively speaking, because of how, especially coming off of the back of a treble, and how dominant he was at Mandalika, to then come in and be seemingly struggling all weekend. It made it feel doubly difficult for him out there this weekend just gone. But it was an absolutely stonking performance from him, and it looked like it was, I'd say, from free practice onwards, it looked like it was on. Because he was putting in some blistering times all through free practice 1, 2, and 3. So that was. What was your take on that weekend?
I be honest, I didn't expect a treble. That's not to sort of put Top Ruck down in any way. I just thought that the weather was I didn't think it was going to be dry for a start. I thought because they've again chosen to run this round during their stormy season, their monsoon season. I just expected at least one of the feature races to be wet, and if it was going to be wet, again, I hate saying it, I had to make JR favourite for that. So I had JR down for a win at least if the weather was poor. I think Top Ruck. That obviously changed, though. That thinking changed once I saw that the dry running. He was when he's in that form where he's just basically banging laps off one after the other in FP1, FP2. When he's in that form, then I'm like, okay, cool. This is looking good for the races. Although I've seen that before where he's looked unstoppable in free practices, even Super Pole, and the race, even though it's dry, it hasn't panned out that way for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. So I was a bit more guarded. I didn't think a treble was on the cards until I basically saw, okay, this is looking good, FP1, FP2. If it stays dry, then, because I know he went well there last season, even in the wet, he was quick there.
Yeah.
And that's where he won like I said, he won the title there last season. But I don't know.
To qualify my prediction of sort of a potential treble, I didn't come into the weekend thinking treble. I was thinking treble, as you say, sort of post watching free practice, and the sorts of times that he was pumping in. But so go ahead.
Yeah, so I just, because of the Ray wind drought, sorry I keep bringing it back to this, but because it has gone on for so long. almost every round, I thought he's going to get at least one win. He'll get one win because he's always there. He's never miles behind. He's always there or thereabouts. But
he's always there until the last sort of 5 laps or so, and then it just the tyres start to give up the ghost.
But how different was it to the start of the season? I mean, I've always said that, for the last couple of seasons, the races that the season kicks off with, Aragon, Estoril, Assen, they are Ray and Kawasaki tracks. Historically, he's gone really well there. And I was reading all of the online comments, like early on, Toprak kept coming in third for those first 3 rounds. It was basically Bautista versus Ray. And, all the haters start, they start coming out the woodwork. They start pissing around with Toprak's name. Oh, where's third rack? Because, he's coming in third. It's like, mate, have you forgotten how good this guy is? Like, also, don't forget, these aren't his tracks yet. There's obviously...
Have you forgotten he's riding with the number 1 on his bike?
Yeah. And, wait until we get into the sort of the main bones of the season. If we get halfway through and he still hasn't won a race, then, I'd say there's a problem.
Yeah.
But I always was confident that once we get to the Toprak tracks, Donington, Manicourt, those sorts of tracks, we were going to see some wins. But, I've digressed slightly. But, with Ray, I just keep thinking every round we come to as it sort of came towards the end of the season, I just kept thinking, he'll get his win. He's going to end this drought. Because that has to weigh on you after a while. This guy's a 6 times champion. He's never gone this long with the Kawasaki team. It's possible he might have gone this long with the Honda team, but that's years ago now. He hasn't got used to this lack of winning. It must be a huge shock to the system, and your ego takes a battering.
Mm-hmm.
And, he's ultra competitive. He still rides. You can still see by his body language. Yeah, he still sticks it on these guys. He's one of the most aggressive riders and sometimes guilty of overstepping the mark. And I don't like the way the English media protect him in that sense. Ray, throughout his career, when it's really got tough, he has put people on their arse. And I don't really have anything against that. It's a win, it's basically a kind of win at all costs. Mark Marquez has done it his entire career. Rossi did it. Nobody's batted an eyelid then. But the English media tend to have this or I say British media, tend to have this sort of, ever since Toprak came up against him and made things very difficult, they had this sort of, Toprak's dangerous. It's like, hang on. You find me the footage of Toprak knocking a rider off. He'll run them wide, sure, he'll block past them, but I can find you loads of footage of Ray just smashing into guys.
Well, just this season he wiped out Bautista.
Yeah, there you go. So, all right, it was a mistake, sure, but, this guy's ultra competitive. So, I've digressed again slightly, but, I just kept thinking that with Mandalika, that Ray was going to be there, but he was not really anywhere, was he? I mean, it was basically it's become the Toprak versus Alvaro show for me in the sort of the second half of the season.
It did a bit, and I'm just looking at the race results now for Mandalika. So race 1, Toprak wins with a gap of 4.3 to Bautista, which is interesting, which is a pretty comfortable distance to win by. And then I'm guessing that what's quoted here as speed is probably the peak speeds recorded.
Right.
So check this one out. So Toprak's peak speed, if I'm guessing that's what this is referring to on the timing chart here, was 283.5 kilometers an hour. Bautista, 291. So he's got 8 kilometers almost on him on the straight.
And it's not a long straight either.
No, it's not. And Ray's just behind Toprak with a peak speed of 282.7. So there's sort of just under a kilometre an hour between the two of them, which is negligible. But between Bautista and Toprak, that's a pretty tasty straight line advantage that Bautista's got there. Which is why he looks like he's coming past them all, and they're all dragging an anchor behind them down on the straights. But Toprak seems to be holding all the records there as well. So he's got the fastest lap, which is a new record set on lap 4, fastest lap of the race of a 1:32, and he's got all the records there. So he's got the Super Pole, he's got the lap record there as well. So that was race 1.
Full house, mate.
Full house of records at Mandalika. And then Bautista's recorded an even higher peak speed in Super Pole of 292, and it doesn't seem to be an exclusively Bautista thing, because again, actually, let me check it.
When you say Super Pole, do you mean the race or the qualifying?
Super Pole race, sorry.
Okay.
So Rinaldi,
I wish they just called it the sprint race.
Yeah, same. Rinaldi also recorded, so it's clearly a Ducati thing, because Rinaldi's recorded a peak speed of 290 in race 1. So right up there. And Vieje on the Honda was a 290.3 as well. So I don't know if he managed to catch a slipstream on some lap somewhere.
No, the Honda, they say the Honda is very, very quick in a straight line. It's not the package Ducati is. It's actually when you give it a long enough straight, it will basically be right up there with a Ducati. It's just that it might not accelerate. Yeah, basically, yeah.
And then similarly in race 2, Bautista's got a handy margin there on straight line speed. So, which kind of, I guess, because there's been some complaints about I didn't actually read all of the articles, but I saw that there was a few sort of article titles with people sort of complaining about the dominance of the Ducati this year. What are your thoughts on that? Does it need to be reined in, or do the other teams need to find some way to extract some more power from their engines?
Both, but I think we discussed this before. I do think there is an issue if there's. I think it's only one rider in Bautista can make a quali tyre. I think essentially last a feature race distance. I think that's an issue. I do think there should be a minimum rider weight limit. Personally, I can't see if I've just admitted that I'd be happy to take on ballast as for fun for go-karting. I don't see why the principle should be any different in world-class racing. I think with bikes, we've talked about it before, where it's not like cars. It's more they're more sensitive to the weight because obviously it's a much smaller piece of machinery.
Yeah.
I think I don't know whether I know Kawasaki's bike has had the 500 revs lopped off of it. I know that for a fact. So it's excuse me. It's limited to 14,600 revs at the moment, when it should rev to 15,100. What I don't know is whether Yamahas are limited. I know that it's got about 350 more revs than the Quack. It revs at it's at 14,950 RPM. But I don't know if that's its absolute ceiling or whether that's been limited as well. Now, I'd argue that if you're looking at this year's racing, the Yamaha and the Kawasaki look pretty much identical in terms of straight line speed.
I wouldn't say there's anything between them. Nothing of note.
No, they can slipstream as long as one gets a good run off the last corner onto a big straight.
Yeah, whoever gets the slipstream will make the pass.
Yeah, one can slipstream the other. And I've got no issue with that. We know that Alvaro can be half a second behind, and as long as the straight's half decently long, he can basically make up half a second on a straight.
I'd say unless you've got a minimum of 4/10 on Alvaro on a decently long back straight, a minimum of 4/10, he's going to come past. And without necessarily even needing to look for a slipstream, because there were so many races this year. I think Most was a good example where he'd come off of the back straight sort of 3, 4, possibly even 5/10 behind, wouldn't look for the slipstream, and it'd just sail by anyway, because he didn't need to. Like, I'm going to get past anyway. So many other forms of motorsport have got a combined have a sort of a combined rider or driver and vehicle package weight limit. F1 does it, and again, F1. We're now talking about these aren't the F1 cars of yesteryear that weighed just over 550, 600 kilos, but they're knocking on sort of 850, 900 kilos now. I think something like that combined weight.
I think they're about 750 kilos now.
And the rest, I'm pretty sure they're in the 800s now with the new regs. But the point being, if you were talking about a 750 kilo car, like you say, the overall package isn't going to be as sensitive to a 5-10 kilo weight difference between the heaviest driver on the grid and the lightest driver on the grid. Whereas when you're talking about machines that a strong gym goer could pick up off the floor, a few kilos here and there is very, very significant. So it seems to be, and it doesn't. And again, looking at these peak speeds recorded here on a track that hasn't got an especially long straight, it's not an exclusively Bautista thing. Bassani's clocking up fairly high speeds. Rinaldi's clocking up very high speeds. So it's and looking at the two of them side by side, Rinaldi and Ray, or Rinaldi and Razgat Lawlor, for example, there doesn't seem to be a massive disparity between them in terms of size and weight. So I understand from Bautista's perspective, he's obviously not going to want to see anything done that's going to diminish his advantage. But every now and again, there is an anomaly which needs to be accounted for. And in this instance, you've got clearly the fastest bike on the grid, paired with the smallest and lightest rider on the grid. And in the interests of it not just being, a one-man show next season. But again, I think the onus is also on Yamaha to extract a bit more
100%.
power out of their machine. But this overall, is running. But this isn't something that would benefit just Toprak, for example. So it's not like I'm coming at this through Toprak tinted glasses. This benefits the entire class.
Yamaha, yes, and the Yamaha riders in general. But it's also running in conjunction it's running in parallel with what Quartararo's experienced all through this year with Yamaha, painfully slow down the straights, and just overriding the bike, at times crashing, because he has to keep up. And it's even worse for him because they've got active aero there. So there's more disrupted air when they're going down straights, because the bikes, obviously, that they squat on the ground and then they brake and they come back up. They've got these winglets, which obviously cause, at least the World Superbikes, they don't really have that issue. But Yamaha have to pull their finger out. And if I'm hearing correctly, Ducati are bringing a revised Panigale out, which is supposed to be quicker than what they've already got. If that's the case, they might as well just give the Alvaro
just don't even bother running the championship.
If you're not going to change anything, that's just a foregone conclusion, because he's a quality rider. He's 38 years old now, so he's sort of got plenty of experience under his belt. He knows now how to win a title. He's been there. He's done it. And like I said, I have no problem with him. I do think Toprak is the better rider, but there's not a night and day difference between them, because I've watched Bautista as his career progressed in the small GP classes. He was always mustard fast. So it's not like he's suddenly got fast. He's always been quick. He's just not been very consistent. But now he's found this alchemy with this bike that he works well with. He's got a huge straight line speed advantage. So, he can afford to just sort of take it easier and be at 7-8 tenths in the bends and then go, I'm just going to wind the wick up now. It's a straight, bang, I'm gone.
And I think that's why... Yeah, go on, sorry.
I was just saying that's why he doesn't hurt his tyres like the rest as well. It
No.
wouldn't be half as bad if the tyre wear wasn't so much of an issue. But when you've got him pumping in fastest laps from start of the race to the finish on some tracks,
Yeah, because
and then the others struggling.
He's putting in fastest laps. Was it? What round was it that we ran before Indonesia? Now my brain's gone blank. Argentina. Let me just check the time sheets, but I'm pretty sure he set his fastest laps sort of a couple of laps from the end. So how are you doing that? Your tyres should be shot. And I think, I was saying just a minute ago about how Ray seems to be there or thereabouts typically until the last 5 or 6 laps. And I think that's testament to the fact that he's just had substandard machinery all year. And I get the sense that he's clearly, an outstanding rider, and he's having to be at 10 tenths from the word go, and because he's doing that, his tyres, he doesn't seem to be able to make the tyres last for a race distance because he's just having to extract every last drop of performance out of them, lap after lap after lap, and then they don't, because all through the season in the I'm just going to call them sprint races because that's what they are, to avoid the confusion. All through the season in the sprint races, he's been much more competitive over 10 laps than over 22 or however many laps that the race runs for, or the full length races run for. So, it's sad to see someone who who's spent so many years at the top of the sport in that class suddenly being relegated to he's gone from, was it 6 championships back to back?
Six back to back.
Six championships on the bounce to then having to wait until the last race of the season to get a win. I
think it was the thick end of 6 months he had to wait.
Yeah, it was something like that. And I think they said on the broadcast 180 something days without a win. He hasn't suddenly got crap. So he's clearly, that's, but the Kawasaki seems to have more problems than just straight line speed. He doesn't seem to have quite the same mid corner speed, perhaps, that Toprak's enjoyed all season. So we'll see. Where was we saying?
We were talking about JR and his, before we were rudely interrupted by my neighbour. We were talking about JR and his win or the lack of win streak that went on for about.
We went from that, and then we said about Yamaha bringing the same bike to the grid next season,
which is what they're essentially doing, from what I've heard.
Yeah, so I've heard the same things. Probably read the same articles that you've read. So again, if that's the case, then don't bother running the championship. Just hand Alvaro the trophy from now, because unless he has a big fall somewhere and spends a weekend or two out through injury, I don't see how he does anything other than win back-to-back championships.
Yeah,
so it'd be interesting to see it. And I don't know whether or not if that's something that Yamaha is doing because they feel like they can develop the bike in the off season to be more competitive, whether or not it's a spending constraint and they don't have the budget to develop a new bike.
Difficult to say. What I want to do though is, before we wrap it up, I just wanted to say John's signed for next year with Puccetti. Funnily enough, Yari's leaving the team. Montella's going to leave, but I think that's very good news. It's more stability. It'll be his 4th season with Puccetti now, and I think now that he's got his head straight, I'd like to think he's going to hit the ground running next season. I don't know who his teammate's going to be at this point, but I think that's good news, and I think it shows, like a vote of confidence that if Manuel didn't want him, he wouldn't have taken
He
him
wouldn't
on.
be there. No, he wouldn't have been. And I think it's his second half of the season performance that's kept him in that ride, because
two more thirds at Mandalika. That was excellent. 2 third positions. He's really, he's really cemented that third position. Obviously, just now needs to just sort of push on and find that extra, whatever's needed to just get to the top step. But I think we'll leave that. We'll round up for now. And what I want to do is basically have like a post-mortem. Our next episode, we'll do like, I think, a post-mortem of each sort of rider in their respective classes. And basically just do like a end of season or end of year report, basically.
Yeah, cool. Sounds like a plan.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for listening, guys. And like I said, this should have been out 2 weeks ago. That sort of grated on me, but it's just sometimes, like I said, life just doesn't always work out the way you want it. But we did get some recorded footage, but it just we couldn't take the chance with the sound.
Awesome, cool. All right, and hopefully we don't have any more brake failures between now and the next episode, because we're
More
very nearly
important
down
than
to
anything.
very nearly down to one host. So
we might even put some pictures up of that. If Khan can get me some pictures, I'll put them up on this pod.
Yeah, they're shocking. It's nothing to do with my driving style. I have not put any big heat cycles on my pads at any point in history, because I've never exceeded the speed limit, Mr. Officer. So there's I sent you a picture earlier. There's a tasty set of discs, pads and discs that are going onto the car as an upgrade. They sent me the wrong ones, actually. I was supposed to be out there after work this evening putting them. But I got 2 sets of rear pads and discs as opposed to a set of front and rears. And you'd have thought that might have set a red flag for someone when they're packaging 2 sets of rears to one customer. But hey ho,
no, obviously not.
It's obviously not. So I hope you enjoyed the episode, and look forward to getting the next one out to you guys.
Thanks a lot, guys. Take care. See you, Con.
See ya. Bye.